Senec guided the scout ship closer, scanning each piece of wreckage as they passed. Broken hull fragments, dead engines, empty escape pods. Nothing unusual. Then, his scanner picked up something. "Sir, I'm detecting... Wait." He frowned, adjusting his instruments. "There's a small energy spike from one of the wrecks. Designation, Icarus class, human experimental vessel." His commanding officer leaned forward with interest. "The one from earlier? The one that damaged 3 of our ships before the cruiser destroyed it?" "That matches the designation, sir. Get closer. I want confirmation of the kill." Senec guided the scout ship directly toward the darkened, broken form of the Icarus, now only a few hundred kilometers away, close enough to see the torn hull with the naked eye through the viewport. Inside the Icarus, Daniel watched the enemy ship's approach on a small backup display, his heart pounding in his chest. "Mira, now would be a great time," he said quietly. "Almost ready," Mira whispered, sweat dripping down her face despite the cold air. "Just need a few more seconds." The Vorak scout ship continued closing the distance, its scanners beginning to sweep across the Icarus's hull in greater detail. 50 kilometers, 30, 10. "I'm reading residual power signatures," Senec reported. "Small, but present. Recommend a closer scan to confirm total system failure." "Proceed," his commander ordered. The scout ship moved even closer, its scanning beam sweeping directly across the Icarus's damaged hull. Inside, Mira's hands finally found the right connection. "Now!" she shouted. A brilliant flash of light and a burst of released gas erupted from the Icarus's damaged hull section, exactly like the final death throes of a destroyed ship losing its last remaining atmosphere and power. On the Vorak scout ship, Senec watched the reading spike, then drop completely to 0. "Final decompression event detected," he reported. "All power signatures gone. The vessel is confirmed destroyed, sir. No survivors possible." His commanding officer nodded, satisfied. "Log it and move on. We have other wreckage to confirm before the final assault." The scout ship turned away, drifting back into the darkness of the battlefield, completely unaware of the sighs of relief echoing through the darkened control room of the destroyed ship they had just left behind. Inside the Icarus, Daniel allowed himself to breathe again, his hands shaking slightly from the tension of the last few minutes. "They bought it," he whispered. Mira, exhausted, leaned back against the console, a tired but relieved smile crossing her face. "Told you it would work." But Daniel's relief was short-lived. He turned toward the main viewport, staring out at the massive Dominion fleet still hanging in the darkness above Earth, hundreds of warships preparing for what would surely be humanity's final battle. They had survived this moment, but Earth was still dying, piece by piece above them. "Aria," Daniel said quietly, his voice serious once again. "How long until the experimental weapon system is fully charged and ready?" There was a brief pause before Aria answered. "Approximately 3 hours, Captain, if we divert all remaining power reserves toward the charging sequence." Daniel looked around at his crew, injured but alive, exhausted but not defeated. He thought about Commander Threxus, somewhere out there in that massive fleet, already believing the war was as good as won. He thought about Earth, still fighting below. And he thought about what General Vasquez had told him before this mission began. Sometimes, the smallest ship changes the biggest war. "Then let's get to work," Daniel said. "We're not finished yet." Outside, the Dominion fleet continued its slow, confident advance toward Earth's surface, completely unaware that the ship they believed was destroyed had just quietly begun its final, desperate preparation. The Icarus was still alive. And soon, the entire galaxy would know it. 3 hours. That was all the time Daniel Reyes had to save what was left of humanity's hope. Inside the Icarus, the crew worked in near silence, moving through the dim red emergency lights like ghosts. Every sound was a risk. Every spark of power was a risk. Somewhere out in the darkness, hundreds of Dominion warships were waiting, watching, ready to finish the job they believed was already done. Daniel stood at the center of the control room, his ribs aching with every breath, watching his small crew work with quiet determination. 12 people. That was all he had left. 12 tired, injured, frightened people and one badly damaged ship, standing between Earth and total defeat. "Talk to me," Daniel said, walking over to where Mira Chen sat hunched over an open panel, wires spread across her lap like a tangled nest. "Power core is stable," Mira said without looking up, her fingers moving quickly, twisting wires together with careful precision. "But barely. We lost almost half our reserves in that last battle. If we want the weapon system fully charged in 3 hours, we need to shut down everything else." "Everything?" Daniel asked. "Life support included," Mira said quietly, finally looking up at him. "We'd have maybe 20 minutes of breathable air left in the room before it got dangerous." Daniel frowned, glancing around at his exhausted crew. Some were barely standing. A few were still recovering from injuries. Cutting life support even for a short time was a serious risk. "Is there another way?" he asked. Mira thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "If we reduce power to non-essential systems instead, lighting, communications, gravity controls, we could probably charge the weapon system in about 5 hours instead of 3. Slower, but safer." Daniel considered this. 5 hours. That was a long time to sit quietly in the dark, hoping no other enemy ship came close enough to notice them. But it was better than risking his crew's lives for speed they might not even need. "Do it," he said. "Slow and safe." Mira nodded and got back to work, her hands steady despite the pain still radiating from her side. As the ship's lights dimmed even further, plunging the control room into deeper shadow, Daniel walked toward the back of the ship, checking on the rest of his crew. In a small side room, Ensign Marcus Webb sat against the wall, a bandage wrapped tightly around his leg, his face pale from blood loss. Beside him, Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's only medical officer, worked quietly, checking his pulse with careful, practiced movements. "How is he?" Daniel asked softly. Sarah looked up, her eyes tired but focused. "He'll live. The wound's clean, no infection yet. But he needs rest, real rest, not this." She gestured around at the cold, dark ship. "None of us are getting real rest today," Daniel said, not unkindly. Sarah gave a small, tired smile. "No, I suppose we're not." Daniel knelt down beside Marcus, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You did good out there." Marcus managed a weak smile. "Didn't feel like it when that cruiser hit us." "We're still here," Daniel said. "That counts for something." He stood, moving through the rest of the ship, checking on each member of his crew, offering quiet words of encouragement where he could. These were not soldiers who had spent their lives training for war. Most of them were scientists, engineers, people who had built this ship with their own hands over the last 3 years, believing in something bigger than themselves. Now, they were the only thing standing between Earth and total destruction. As Daniel made his way back toward the control room, he paused by a small viewport, staring out at the darkness of space. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of explosions, the last dying flashes of human ships being destroyed by the overwhelming Dominion fleet. Earth was still down there somewhere beyond that darkness, still fighting, still holding on. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his family. His younger sister still living in what used to be a peaceful coastal town before the invasion began. His parents, both gone years earlier, before any of this had started. He wondered if his sister was safe, if she was hiding somewhere underground like so many others, waiting, praying that someone, anyone, could turn the tide of this war. "Captain," Arya's voice broke through his thoughts. "I am detecting movement nearby." Daniel's eyes snapped open. "What kind of movement?" "A Dominion patrol group. 3 ships. They are conducting a sweep of the debris field, likely searching for any remaining human vessels or survivors." Daniel's heart began to pound. Distance? 12,000 kilometers and closing slowly. Estimated time to reach our position, approximately 40 minutes if they maintain their current search pattern. Daniel rushed back into the control room where Mira looked up sharply at the sound of his footsteps. "What's happening?" she asked. "Dominion patrol, 3 ships, 40 minutes out," Daniel said quickly. Mira's face paled. "We're nowhere near ready. The weapon system barely has a quarter charge. Can we hide? Move deeper into the debris field?" Arya's voice answered before Mira could. "Engines remain offline, Captain. Any attempt to restart them now would create an immediate and highly visible energy signature." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. They couldn't run. They couldn't fight. Not yet. All they could do was hope the same trick that worked before would work again. "Arya, can we fake another decompression event?" "Unlikely to succeed twice, Captain. The Vorak patrol will likely be more thorough this time, given the previous scout's report of confirmed destruction. A second decompression event so soon after the first would appear highly suspicious." Daniel's stomach tightened. They needed another plan, and they needed it fast. He looked around the control room, his eyes falling on the ship's damaged hull, on the scattered debris field surrounding them, on the wreckage of destroyed human ships floating silently all around the Icarus. An idea began to form in his mind. "Arya, how many other wrecked ships are in this debris field?" "Approximately 47 confirmed wrecks, Captain, ranging from small fighters to larger support vessels." "Can we use them? Position ourselves among the largest pieces of wreckage? Use their mass to hide our own energy signature?" There was a brief pause as Arya processed the request. "It is possible, Captain, but it would require careful use of small maneuvering thrusters. Any thruster activity carries some risk of detection, though significantly less than a full engine restart." Daniel looked to Mira. "Can you handle the thrusters manually? Small, careful movements, just enough to shift our position?" Mira nodded, though clearly exhausted. "I can try." "Do it. We need to get closer to that large wreck area flagged earlier. The old cargo hauler." Mira quickly rerouted power to the small emergency thrusters, her hands steady despite her fatigue. Slowly, carefully, the Icarus began to drift, guided by tiny bursts of controlled thrust, moving through the silent debris field toward the massive broken form of a destroyed cargo ship. Minutes passed in tense silence as the ship inched closer, positioning itself directly behind the larger wreck, using its massive hull to help shield their own smaller vessel from direct scanning angles. "Position achieved," Arya reported. "We are now approximately 80% shielded from direct sensor sweeps, assuming the patrol maintains its current search pattern." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good work, everyone." But the danger was far from over. On the lead ship of the Dominion patrol group, a Vorak officer named Tarn Keswick studied his scanner readings carefully, frowning at the data in front of him. "Anything unusual?" his commanding officer asked. "Just the usual wreckage, sir," Tarn replied. "Though," he paused, adjusting his instruments. "Though what?" "There's a slight irregularity near that large cargo wreck. Could be nothing, just debris shifting in the field. But I'd like to take a closer look, just to be thorough." His commanding officer nodded. "Proceed carefully. Command wants a complete sweep before the final assault begins." The patrol group altered course slightly, moving toward the large cargo wreck where the Icarus lay hidden in its shadow. Inside the Icarus, Daniel watched the approaching enemy signatures on the backup display, his jaw tight with tension. "They're changing course," he said quietly. "Heading this way." Mira's hands tightened on the thruster controls. "Do we move again?" "If we move now, they'll definitely see the thruster signature," Daniel said, thinking quickly. "We stay still. Complete silence. No power except absolute minimum life support." The order rippled through the ship. One by one, remaining non-essential systems shut down completely, plunging the Icarus into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faintest emergency lighting, barely enough to see by. The crew sat in tense silence, barely breathing, as the sound of their own heartbeat seemed to echo louder than anything else in the ship. Outside, the Dominion patrol group drew closer, their scanning beams sweeping across the massive cargo wreck, searching for anything unusual. "I'm reading the same energy irregularity," Tarn reported to his commander. Small but present. Could be residual power from something hidden behind the wreck. Send a smaller scout drone to investigate directly, his commander ordered. If it's nothing, we move on. If it's something... He did not need to finish the sentence. A small automated scout drone detached from the lead Dominion ship, its tiny form drifting silently through the debris field, heading directly toward the shadow where the Icarus lay hidden. Inside the Icarus, Aria's voice, barely above a whisper through the failing speakers, delivered grim news. Captain, a Dominion scout drone is approaching our position directly. Estimated time to visual contact, 90 seconds. Daniel's mind raced. 90 seconds. If that drone got close enough for a direct visual scan, it would immediately spot the Icarus, badly damaged but clearly still intact, hiding in the shadow of the larger wreck. He looked around at his crew, at the fear evident on their tired faces, and knew he had to make a decision. Fast. Aria, can we redirect the drone somehow? Some kind of signal, jamming, anything? Insufficient power reserves for active jamming, Captain, without revealing our position through the power spike itself. Daniel's jaw tightened. There had to be another way. His eyes fell on a small storage compartment near the back of the control room, containing emergency spare parts, including several small, unused sensor decoys, originally designed to help confuse enemy targeting systems during combat. Aria, do we still have any functional sensor decoys? 2 remaining, Captain, though their effectiveness against direct visual inspection is limited. It's worth a try. Can we launch one manually, directed away from our position? Possible, Captain, though it would require someone to manually access the external launch tube, which is currently inaccessible from the main control room due to hull damage. Daniel's stomach dropped. How do we access it? Through the maintenance corridor, Captain. However, that section of the ship currently has no breathable atmosphere due to the earlier hull breach. Daniel looked around the room, his mind working quickly. Someone would need to put on an emergency suit and physically make their way through a damaged, airless section of the ship, launch the decoy manually, all within the next 90 seconds. I'll go, said a voice from behind him. Daniel turned to see Ensign Webb, still pale from blood loss, pulling himself up despite his injured leg, already reaching for a nearby emergency suit. Marcus, you can barely stand, Daniel said. I can make it, Marcus insisted, gritting his teeth as he pulled the suit on over his injured leg. Everyone else is busy keeping this ship running. I can do this. Daniel hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Go. 60 seconds, Marcus. That's all you have. Marcus nodded, sealing his helmet in place before moving as quickly as his injured leg would allow toward the damaged maintenance corridor, disappearing through the emergency airlock. Inside the dark, airless corridor, Marcus pulled himself forward using handholds along the wall, his breathing loud and heavy inside his helmet, his injured leg burning with pain and effort. 30 seconds, Aria's voice reported through his suit's internal comm. Marcus pushed himself faster, finally reaching the small manual launch console near the external tube. His hands, shaking from pain and adrenaline, worked quickly to override the manual controls. 15 seconds. The decoy loaded into position. 10 seconds. Marcus slammed his hand against the manual release trigger. The small decoy shot out from the ship's external tube, its own tiny power signature activating instantly, drifting away from the Icarus at high speed, directly across the path of the approaching Dominion scout drone. Outside, the enemy scout drone's sensors immediately picked up the new, closer, more obvious energy signature, its automated targeting priorities shifting instantly toward the more prominent decoy instead of the deeply shadowed Icarus. New contact detected, Tarn reported to his commanding officer. Small vessel, attempting evasive maneuvers, moving away from the wreck field. Pursue and destroy, his commander ordered without hesitation. The Dominion patrol group altered course, moving away from the large cargo wreck, chasing after the fleeing decoy instead, completely unaware of the true target still hidden silently in the shadows behind them. Inside the Icarus, Marcus collapsed against the corridor wall, breathing heavily, relief flooding through his exhausted body as he watched the enemy signatures on his suit's small display finally begin moving away. "They're leaving," he said weakly into his comm. It worked. Back in the control room, Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment, allowing himself a small breath of relief before quickly moving to help Marcus back through the airlock. "That was too close," Mira said, her voice shaking slightly as she watched the enemy patrol finally disappear from their sensors completely. "Too close," Daniel agreed. "But we're still here." He helped Marcus back into the control room, removing his helmet, checking his injured leg with concern. "You did good," Daniel said. "Really good." Marcus, pale and exhausted, managed a small, tired smile. "Just doing my job, Captain." Daniel turned back toward the main console, his mind already shifting toward their next challenge. They had survived for now, but time was still working against them. "Aria, status on the weapon system?" "Charging progress currently at 31%, Captain. Estimated time to full charge, given current power constraints, approximately 4 hours. 4 hours. Daniel looked around at his exhausted, injured crew, knowing they had already used most of their luck surviving this long. He thought about Earth, still burning somewhere below them. He thought about Commander Threxus, confident and unaware, preparing for what he believed would be humanity's final defeat. He thought about the words General Vasquez had given him before this mission. If it works, it could change everything. They had survived the scout ship. They had survived the patrol group. But Daniel knew deep down that their luck would not hold forever. Somewhere out in the darkness, the true test was still coming, and the Icarus, still broken, still hidden, still fighting against impossible odds, had to be ready when it arrived. "Everyone," Daniel said, turning to face his tired, determined crew. "We've made it this far. Let's make sure it counts." Outside, in the vast darkness of space, the massive Dominion fleet continued its slow, patient approach toward Earth's final defenses, completely unaware that the greatest threat to their entire invasion was quietly waiting, hidden among the wreckage, preparing to strike when they least expected it. 4 hours felt like a lifetime when death was waiting just outside the walls. Inside the Icarus, the crew moved like shadows, quiet and careful, every action measured against the danger of being discovered. The ship sat hidden behind the massive cargo wreck, its systems running on the barest minimum of power, its crew exhausted but determined. Daniel Reyes stood at the center of the control room, watching the slow, steady progress bar on the main display. 42%. The weapon system was charging, but not fast enough. Not nearly fast enough. "Area," he said quietly. "Any change in the situation outside?" "Negative, Captain. The Dominion Patrol Group has moved approximately 15,000 kilometers away, still pursuing the decoy signature. However, I am detecting increased fleet movement near Earth's orbit. It appears the main assault may be beginning soon." Daniel's chest tightened. "How soon?" "Difficult to determine precisely, Captain. Based on fleet positioning patterns, I estimate the final assault could begin within the next 2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours. And the weapon system needed 4 hours just to reach full charge." Daniel closed his eyes, doing the math in his head, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. "We're not going to make it in time," Mira said quietly from her station, having overheard the exchange. Her voice was tired but steady. "Not if we wait for full charge." Daniel turned to her. "What if we don't wait for full charge?" Mira frowned. "The weapon system needs at least 70% charge to be effective. Anything less and the output won't be strong enough to make a real difference." "What's our current charge rate?" Mira checked her instruments. "At this rate, we'll hit 70% in about 3 hours. It's close, but it might just be enough." "Then that's our target," Daniel said. 70%, 3 hours. We push everything we have toward that goal." Mira nodded, her hands already moving back to her console, adjusting power distribution once again, squeezing every last bit of efficiency out of their limited resources. As the ship continued its silent work, Daniel found himself once again wandering back to check on his crew. Dr. Sarah Kim was resting for the first time in hours, having finally stabilized all of the injured crew members to the best of her ability, given their limited medical supplies. Ensign Webb was sleeping, exhausted from his dangerous mission through the airless corridor earlier. Daniel found himself standing beside Mira once again, watching her work. "You should rest too," he said softly. Mira shook her head without looking up. "Can't. Too much to do, and honestly, I don't think I could sleep even if I tried." Daniel understood completely. His own mind was racing too fast for rest, thoughts constantly shifting between their current danger, their limited time, and the fate of everyone still fighting and dying on Earth below. "Can I ask you something?" Mira said suddenly, still focused on her work. "Of course. Do you think this will actually work? The weapon system, I mean. Do you think it can really make a difference against a fleet that size?" Daniel considered the question carefully before answering. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "But I know that doing nothing definitely won't make a difference, so we might as well try." Mira nodded slowly, seeming to find some comfort in his honesty. "That's actually a good enough reason for me." Their conversation was interrupted by Aria's voice, suddenly sharp with urgency. "Captain, significant fleet movement detected near Earth's orbit. The Dominion assault appears to be beginning." Daniel rushed to the main display, his heart pounding, as he watched the sensor readings update in real time. Hundreds of Dominion warships were beginning to move in formation, breaking away from their holding positions, advancing directly toward Earth's remaining defenses. "Time until full engagement?" Daniel asked. "Estimated 30 minutes, Captain, until Dominion forces reach Earth's outer defense perimeter." 30 minutes, and their weapon system was still only at 45% charge. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. They weren't going to make it in time. Earth's final defenses would be overwhelmed long before the Icarus was ready to strike. "Options," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the panic rising inside him. "I need options." Mira's fingers flew across her console, calculating rapidly. "If we push everything, and I mean everything, all remaining power, all reserves, we might get to 60% charge in that time. It's risky, dangerous even, but it might be enough to make a difference," Daniel finished. "Captain," Aria interjected, "I must warn you that pushing all remaining power reserves toward the weapon system will leave nothing for life support, structural integrity systems, or emergency protocols. If anything goes wrong during this process, the crew will be in extreme danger." Daniel looked around at his exhausted crew, each of them watching him now, waiting for his decision. He thought about Earth, about the millions of people counting on someone, anyone, to make a difference. He thought about General Vasquez's words. "Sometimes the smallest ship changes the biggest war." "Do it," Daniel said firmly. "All power to the weapon system. We're not sitting here quietly while Earth falls." The crew moved quickly, without hesitation, rerouting every last bit of available power toward the experimental weapon core. Lights flickered and died throughout the ship as non-essential systems shut down completely. The air grew colder as environmental controls powered down to minimal levels. On the main display, the charge percentage began climbing faster. 48%, 52%, 55%. "Captain," Aria reported, "Dominion forces have engaged Earth's outer defense perimeter. Human casualties are significant." Daniel gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand rather than the devastating reports coming through. "Keep pushing. We need more." 58%, 60%. "Engines are now offline completely," Mira reported, sweat beading on her forehead despite the increasingly cold air. "We've committed everything to the weapon system." 63%, 65%. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared briefly before quickly cutting off, power too limited to sustain even emergency warning systems for long. "What was that?" Daniel demanded. Structural stress detected along the damaged hull section, Arya reported. The power surge is placing additional strain on our already compromised systems. There is a risk of complete structural failure if we continue pushing power at this rate. Daniel's jaw tightened. They were pushing the ship to its absolute limits, and it was beginning to show. How much longer until 65% becomes 70%? At current rate, approximately 8 minutes, Captain. However, structural integrity may fail before reaching that threshold. 8 minutes. It felt like an eternity. Keep going, Daniel said, his voice tight with tension. We've come too far to stop now. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Somewhere deep within the vessel, metal groaned under stress, the sound echoing ominously through the dark corridors. 67%. Captain, I'm detecting a hull breach forming near Section 4, Arya warned urgently. If this continues, we risk losing structural integrity entirely. Daniel looked to Mira, desperation clear on both their faces. Can we reinforce it somehow? Not without diverting power away from the weapon system, Mira said, her voice strained. It's one or the other, Captain. 68%. Daniel's mind raced, weighing impossible options against each other. If they diverted power to reinforce the hull, they might lose the charge they desperately needed. If they didn't, the ship itself might tear apart before they ever got the chance to use their weapon. How bad is the breach? He asked. Section 4 is currently unoccupied, Captain. If containment fails, we would lose that section of the ship, but the rest of the vessel should remain intact, assuming no further structural damage occurs. It was a risk, but it was the only choice that made sense. Let it go, Daniel said. Full power to the weapon system. We accept the loss of Section 4. The ship shuddered violently one final time as a distant explosion echoed through the corridors, followed by an eerie silence as the damaged section depressurized completely, sealing itself off from the rest of the ship. 69%, 70%. Charge threshold reached, Captain, Arya announced. Weapon system is now at minimum operational capacity. Daniel felt a surge of relief, quickly tempered by the reality of what came next. They had power. Now, they needed a target and the courage to use it. Arya, show me the battle, Daniel said. The main display flickered to life, showing a devastating scene unfolding near Earth's orbit. Human ships, what remained of them, were being systematically destroyed by the overwhelming Dominion fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness in a horrifying display of one-sided destruction. At the center of the Dominion formation, Daniel spotted it. The massive flagship, Commander Threxus's vessel, directing the assault with cold, calculated precision. There, Daniel said, pointing at the screen. That's our target. Mira's eyes widened. The flagship? Captain, that's the most heavily defended ship in their entire fleet. Which is exactly why taking it out would matter most, Daniel said. If we can disable their command ship even briefly, it could throw their entire assault into confusion. It might buy Earth's defenders enough time to regroup. Mira hesitated, but nodded slowly. It's incredibly risky. We'd have to get closer than we probably should for the weapon to be effective at only 70% charge. Then we get close, Daniel said firmly. Arya, can we restart the engines now that we're at threshold charge? Affirmative, Captain, though I must warn you that any engine activation will immediately reveal our position to the entire Dominion fleet. Daniel knew this. He had known it from the moment he decided to power the weapon system instead of remaining hidden. There was no more hiding now, no more playing dead. It was time to fight. Everyone, Daniel said, turning to address his crew. This is it. Once we move, they'll see us coming. This isn't going to be subtle, and it isn't going to be safe. But if we do this right, we might actually make a difference today. His crew, exhausted, injured but resolute, nodded back at him with quiet determination. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. Arya, engines online. Set a direct intercept course toward the Dominion flagship. Course set, Captain. Estimated time to weapon range, 4 minutes. The Icarus's engines roared back to life, breaking free from the shadow of the cargo wreck, streaking directly toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Lieutenant Kor's console suddenly flashed with an urgent alert. "Commander, we have a new contact. Small vessel, moving at high speed directly toward our position." Threxus turned, frowning at the sudden interruption. "Identify it." Kor's eyes widened as the ship's designation appeared on his screen. "Commander, it's the Icarus, the human ship we confirmed destroyed earlier." Threxus's golden eyes narrowed sharply. "Impossible. Show me." The main screen shifted, displaying the small, badly damaged human vessel racing directly toward their position, its engines burning brightly, no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be dead. "They deceived us," Threxus said slowly, a mixture of surprise and something almost like respect crossing his features. "Clever." "Orders, Commander?" Kor asked urgently. Threxus's expression hardened. "Destroy it, immediately. I want that ship gone before it gets anywhere near us." Dominion escort ships immediately broke formation, turning to intercept the rapidly approaching Icarus, weapons charging, ready to finish what they believed had already been finished once before. Inside the Icarus, Daniel watched as multiple enemy signatures shifted course, moving to intercept them. "They're sending ships to stop us," Mira reported, her voice tense. "How many?" "At least 6, Captain, and closing fast." Daniel gripped the edge of his console, his mind racing. 6 enemy ships, and they still needed to get close enough to the flagship for their weapon to be effective. "Arya, evasive maneuvers. Keep us moving, keep us hard to hit." "Attempting, Captain, though our damaged hull limits maneuverability significantly." The Icarus banked sharply, dodging incoming enemy fire as the 6 Dominion ships closed in from multiple directions. Explosions bloomed around them as enemy weapons found near misses, the ship shuddering with each close call. 2 minutes to weapon range," Arya reported. "We're not going to make it," Mira said, watching as the enemy ships continued closing the distance, weapons charging for another volley. Daniel's mind raced, searching desperately for any advantage, any option that could buy them the time they needed. His eyes fell on the tactical display, on the positioning of the enemy ships, on the massive flagship still looming ahead of them. An idea, desperate and dangerous, began to form in his mind. "Arya, can we use the debris field behind us as cover, force them to break formation to avoid it?" "Possible, Captain, though it would require precise timing and carry significant risk given our current speed and heading." "Do it now." The Icarus banked sharply, diving directly toward a scattered section of debris left over from earlier battles. The pursuing Dominion ships, unable to safely follow through the dense debris field at high speed, were forced to break formation, scattering in different directions to avoid collision. "It worked," Mira exclaimed. "They're breaking off pursuit." The stars did not care. They never had. For billions of years they had watched planets rise and fall, watched life bloom and die, watched empires burn to ash. Tonight, they watched another world about to join that long list of the forgotten. Earth. A small blue planet spinning quietly in a corner of the galaxy was about to become a memory. Above the planet, space was on fire. Thousands of alien warships filled the sky like a swarm of metal locusts. Their hulls were dark gray, shaped like curved blades, humming with power that bent light around them. This was the Vorik Dominion, a species that had conquered over 400 worlds in the last 1,000 years. They did not ask for surrender. They did not offer mercy. They simply came, and they took. And now, they had come for Earth. Human defense stations, once proud symbols of humanity's reach into space, were now broken skeletons drifting in the dark. Fires burned in the vacuum, extinguished quickly by the cold of space, only for new explosions to light the darkness again. Escape pods scattered like fireflies, most of them destroyed before they ever reached safety. On the bridge of the Vorik flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a curved fang, stood Commander Threxus Vale. He was tall, with gray skin and sharp golden eyes that had watched hundreds of worlds fall before this one. He folded his arms behind his back and looked at the burning planet on the main screen. "Status report," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. A younger officer, Lieutenant Kor, answered quickly. 94% of human defense fleet destroyed, Commander. The remaining 6% are scattered and disorganized. Their home planet's shields are failing. We estimate full surrender within 6 hours. Threxus nodded slowly. As expected. He had studied humanity for years before this invasion began. He had read their history, their wars, their science. Humans were clever, yes. Stubborn, yes. But they were also slow, weak, divided. They fought each other more than they fought together. Their technology was decades behind the Dominions. Their ships were built for exploration, not war. They call themselves the strongest species on their planet, Threxus said quietly, almost to himself. And yet, compared to us, they are children playing with sticks pretending to be soldiers. Lieutenant Kor allowed himself a small smile. Should we begin the final assault on the surface, Commander? Not yet, Threxus said. Let them suffer a little longer. Let them understand what it means to lose. He turned back to the screen, watching another human station collapse into pieces, its lights fading into darkness. Far below, on Earth, the mood was very different. In an underground command center beneath what used to be a major city, exhausted soldiers and scientists worked without rest. Screens flickered with static as more and more communication channels went silent, one by one, like candles being blown out in the wind. General Elena Vasquez, the officer in charge of Earth's remaining defense, stood in front of the main display, her face pale but calm. She had not slept in 2 days. Her uniform was stained with dust from a nearby explosion. But her eyes were steady. Report, she said. A young technician, barely 23 years old, looked up with fear in his eyes. Ma'am, we've lost contact with Fleet Group 7. Fleet Group 3 is gone. Fleet Group 1, we don't know. No response in 20 minutes. Elena closed her eyes for just a moment. 20 minutes ago, Fleet Group 1 had over 300 ships. Now, silence. What about the Icarus? She asked. The technician hesitated. Still no signal, ma'am. She went dark during the last wave of attacks. We have to assume— Don't, Elena said sharply. Don't assume anything, not yet. The Icarus was Earth's newest experimental warship, built in secret over the last 3 years. It was smaller than most Dominion ships, but it carried technology that no other human vessel had, technology that even Elena did not fully understand, built by a team of scientists working under strict secrecy. It had been sent into the heart of the battle 2 hours ago. And then, nothing. Far above Earth, in the middle of a debris field left behind by a destroyed space station, the Icarus drifted silently through the darkness. The ship was badly damaged. One side of its hull was torn open, sparks occasionally flashing from broken wiring. Its engines were dark. No lights shone from its windows. To anyone scanning from a distance, it looked exactly like all the other dead ships floating around it, just another piece of wreckage in a graveyard of war. But inside, something was still alive. In the ship's control room, dim red emergency lights flickered weakly. The air was thin and cold. Captain Daniel Reyes lay slumped in his chair, a deep cut across his forehead. Blood dried against his skin. His breathing was slow, shallow, but steady. Around him, the rest of the small crew, only 12 people chosen specifically for this dangerous mission, were in similar states, some unconscious, some awake but too weak to move. One young engineer, Mira Chen, was pressed against a wall holding a wound in her side, biting back a cry of pain. The ship's artificial intelligence, a calm synthetic voice known simply as Aria, spoke softly through the failing speakers. Captain Reyes, life support at 11%. Hull integrity critical, power reserves low. Daniel's eyes slowly opened. Pain shot through his skull as he tried to sit up. Aria, he whispered, his voice dry and cracked. Status. We are alive, Captain. That is the only good news I have. Daniel let out a weak, tired laugh, immediately regretting it as pain flared in his ribs. That's something. He looked around the dark control room. His crew, his friends, were barely holding on. He remembered the battle now, pieces of it flashing back into his mind. The Icarus had been ordered to test its new experimental weapon system against a small group of Dominion ships, a trial run before it could be used on a larger scale. It had worked. For about 30 seconds, the Icarus had done more damage to the enemy than an entire fleet of human ships combined. And then, a Dominion cruiser, 20 times the size of the Icarus, had appeared and nearly destroyed them in a single, devastating attack. They had barely survived. The ship had gone completely dark, drifting lifelessly, playing dead among the wreckage of the battle. It was the only reason they hadn't been finished off already. "How long have we been out?" Daniel asked. "Approximately 4 hours, Captain," Arya replied. 4 hours. Daniel's chest tightened. 4 hours of silence from Earth's perspective. They probably think we're dead. He forced himself to stand, gripping the edge of his chair as the room spun around him. Slowly, painfully, he made his way toward Mira, kneeling beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "Stay with me, okay?" Mira's eyes fluttered open, unfocused for a moment before finding his face. "Captain, did we win?" Daniel hesitated. He looked around at the darkened ship, at his injured crew, at the emergency lights barely holding on. "We're still here," he said instead. "That's a start." He turned back toward the main console, his mind racing despite the pain in his body. "Arya, can you access external sensors? I need to know what's out there." "Attempting now, Captain. Please be aware any active scan may reveal our position to nearby enemy ships. Do it quietly. Passive scan only." A few seconds passed. Then, Arya's voice returned, more serious than before. "Captain, I am detecting a Dominion scout ship approaching our position. Distance, 8,000 kilometers and closing." Daniel's blood ran cold. "They're coming to confirm the kill," he muttered. This was it. If that scout ship got close enough to properly scan the Icarus, it would immediately notice the ship still had power, still had life signs aboard. And then, more ships would come. Bigger ships. Ships that would finish what the cruiser had started. "Arya, can we move?" "Negative, Captain. Engines are offline. Any attempt to restart them will create an energy signature visible to enemy sensors." Daniel gritted his teeth, his mind working quickly through their limited options. "What about the weapon system, the one we tested earlier?" There was a brief pause. "The experimental core is still intact, Captain. However, it requires significant power to activate. Power we currently do not have available without alerting the enemy scout." Daniel looked around the dim control room at his crew, exhausted, injured, but alive. He thought about Earth, about the millions of people still down there, still fighting, still hoping. He thought about all the ships that had already been lost, all the soldiers who would never come home. He thought about the last words Command had given him before this mission. If it works, it could change everything. "Wake up the crew," Daniel said quietly. "Whoever can move. We need every hand ready." "Captain, in your current condition, Arya," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm despite the pain. "We didn't come out here to die quietly in the dark. If that scout finds us, we're finished anyway. But if we can survive long enough, if we can use what we built here today, we might actually have a chance." A pause. Then Arya's voice, calm as always, but somehow carrying a hint of something almost like respect. "Understood, Captain. Beginning emergency crew revival sequence." Slowly, painfully, the crew of the Icarus began to stir. Groans of pain filled the dark control room as injured soldiers and scientists forced themselves back to consciousness, back to duty, despite everything their bodies were telling them to do. Daniel moved to the center of the room, his hand resting against the cold metal wall of his ship. The ship that had somehow, against all odds, kept them alive this long. Outside, in the endless dark of space, the Dominion scout ship continued its approach, completely unaware of what was waking up inside the wreckage it was about to inspect. 7,000 kilometers, 6,000, 5,000. Inside the Icarus, Mira Chen, despite her injury, had crawled to her station, her hands shaking as she began reconnecting damaged wiring beneath the main console. Sparks occasionally flew as she worked, but she did not stop. "Talk to me, Mira," Daniel said, kneeling beside her. I think I can reroute enough power for a short-range pulse," she said through gritted teeth. "It won't be much, but it might be enough to—" She stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Enough to what?" Daniel asked. Mira looked up at him. Her face pale, but her eyes suddenly sharp with an idea. "Enough to make them think we're already destroyed. A final decompression burst, like the last dying breath of a wrecked ship. If the scout sees that, it might just log us as confirmed dead and move on instead of getting close enough for a full scan." Daniel considered this for a moment. It was risky. If it didn't work, it would only draw more attention to them faster. But it was also their best chance. "Do it," he said. Mira nodded, turning back to her work with newfound focus, her fingers moving quickly despite her injury. 3,000 kilometers. 2,000. Inside the Vorak scout ship, a small vessel with only 3 crew members aboard, the pilot, a young Vorak named Senek, watched the wreckage field ahead of them on his scanner. "Anything interesting out there?" his commanding officer asked from behind him. Senek studied the debris field carefully. "Mostly confirmed wreckage, sir. Human ships destroyed during the earlier engagement. Nothing showing active power signatures." "Good. Let's do a quick pass and move on. Commander Threxus wants full confirmation before the final assault begins." "Not all of them," Aria warned. 2 ships have maintained pursuit, adjusting course to intercept us on the other side of the debris field." Daniel's jaw tightened, watching as 2 Dominion ships continued their relentless chase, weapons already charging for another attack as the Icarus emerged from the debris field, still racing toward the distant flagship. 1 minute to weapon range, Aria reported. "Incoming fire," Mira shouted urgently. The ship shook violently as enemy weapons fire struck their already damaged hull, alarms blaring briefly before cutting off due to limited power. "Hull integrity at critical levels," Aria warned. "We cannot sustain much more damage, Captain." Daniel gripped his console tightly, watching the distance counter on his display slowly ticking down toward weapon range, knowing they were running out of time, running out of ship, running out of options. 30 seconds, Aria reported. Another explosion rocked the ship, throwing Daniel against his console. Sparks flew from a nearby panel as critical systems began failing under the strain. "We're losing power to the weapon system," Mira shouted urgently. 15 seconds, Aria reported, her voice somehow still calm despite the chaos. Daniel forced himself back to his feet, watching the flagship growing larger on the main display. Close now, so close. 10 seconds. The 2 pursuing Dominion ships closed in for what would surely be a final, devastating strike. 5 seconds. Daniel's hand hovered over the weapon activation console, his heart pounding, every instinct in his body screaming at him to hold on just a little longer. 3, 2, 1. "Weapon range achieved, Captain," Aria announced urgently. "All systems ready. Awaiting your command." Daniel looked out at the massive Dominion flagship, filling their entire viewport now, close enough to see the intricate details of its curved, blade-like hull. Behind them, the 2 pursuing enemy ships prepared their final attack, weapons fully charged, ready to destroy the small human vessel once and for all. Daniel's hand came down firmly on the activation console. "Fire," he said. Light exploded from the Icarus. A brilliant beam of blue-white energy shot forward from the ship's damaged hull, cutting through the darkness of space like a blade made of pure light. It struck the Dominion flagship directly along its central hull, exactly where Daniel had aimed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire flagship shuddered violently. Inside the massive vessel, Commander Threxus was thrown from his position as the ship rocked beneath him, alarms blaring throughout the bridge for the first time since the invasion had begun. "Report!" Threxus shouted, pulling himself back to his feet. Lieutenant Kor scrambled at his console, eyes wide with shock. "Commander, we've taken a direct hit to our main power core. Shields are down, weapon systems offline. We've lost primary engine control. Threxus stared at the screen in disbelief. A single, small, badly damaged human ship had just crippled his flagship, one of the most powerful vessels in the entire Dominion fleet. That's impossible, he whispered. But it wasn't impossible. It had happened. Outside, in the chaos of space, the two pursuing Dominion ships that had been closing in on the Icarus suddenly broke off their attack, confused by the sudden crisis aboard their flagship, uncertain what had just occurred. Inside the Icarus, the control room was in chaos. The massive energy discharge had drained nearly every remaining power reserve on the ship, leaving systems flickering and failing throughout the vessel. Did it work? Daniel asked, his voice tight with exhaustion and hope. Confirmed direct hit on the flagship's main power core, Aria reported, her voice weaker now, systems clearly struggling to maintain function. Significant damage detected. The vessel appears to be losing primary power and weapon capability. A cheer, weak but genuine, rose from the exhausted crew scattered throughout the ship. Mira, tears mixing with sweat on her face, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." But Daniel knew their fight wasn't over yet. He looked at the tactical display, watching as the crippled flagship drifted, powerless, among the chaos of battle still raging around Earth. "Aria, status on the rest of the Dominion fleet?" "Significant confusion detected among enemy formations, Captain. Without central command guidance from the flagship, coordinated attack patterns have begun breaking down." Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Without their flagship directing the assault, the massive Dominion fleet was beginning to lose its coordination, ships moving independently, uncertain of their next orders. "This is our chance," Daniel said. "Aria, can you get a message through to Earth's remaining defense forces?" "Attempting now, Captain, though our communication systems are severely damaged." A tense moment passed as Aria worked to establish contact through the ship's failing systems. Down on Earth in the underground command center, General Elena Vasquez stood watching the chaotic battle unfolding on her main display, confusion evident among her exhausted staff. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Why are they breaking formation?" A technician, eyes wide with disbelief, looked up from his console. "General, we're detecting massive disruption in the enemy flagship. Someone hit their command ship directly." Elena's eyes widened. "Who? How?" Before the technician could answer, a new signal flickered weakly onto the communication display. A familiar designation that Elena had given up hope of ever seeing again. "General Vasquez," Daniel's voice came through, weak and static-filled but unmistakably alive. "This is Captain Reyes aboard the Icarus. We just hit their flagship." Elena felt tears sting her eyes, relief and disbelief flooding through her exhausted body. "Captain Reyes? We thought you were destroyed hours ago." "We're still here, General," Daniel said. "Barely, but we're here. Their fleet is in chaos without central command. This might be our only chance to turn this battle around." Elena straightened immediately, years of military training taking over despite her exhaustion. "Understood, Captain. What do you need from us?" "Every ship you have left, General. Hit them now while they're still disorganized. We won't get another chance like this." Elena turned to her remaining staff, her voice suddenly filled with renewed determination. "You heard the captain. Get me every remaining fleet group on emergency channel. All ships, all pilots. We're going on the offensive, immediately." Throughout Earth's scattered remaining defense forces, urgent orders began transmitting rapidly. Exhausted pilots who moments before had believed the battle was already lost suddenly found new purpose, new hope, as reports of the crippled Dominion flagship spread quickly through their ranks. What remained of humanity's fleet, badly outnumbered but no longer without hope, began regrouping, forming new attack formations, directing their remaining strength toward the confused and disorganized Dominion forces. Aboard the crippled flagship, Commander Threxus watched in growing horror as his carefully planned invasion began falling apart around him. "Get me emergency power to weapons and shields immediately," he ordered. "Working on it, Commander," Kor replied urgently. but our main power core sustained critical damage. Full restoration will take time we may not have. On the tactical display, Threxus watched as human ships, which moments before had been fleeing in retreat, suddenly turned and began coordinated counterattacks against his scattered, confused fleet. How? Threxus muttered, disbelief evident in his voice. How did one small, damaged ship cause this much chaos? He had underestimated them. He realized that now, watching his supposedly unstoppable invasion beginning to crumble because of a single vessel he had confidently declared destroyed hours earlier. Back aboard the Icarus, Daniel watched the tactical display with growing hope, as Earth's remaining forces began pushing back against the disorganized Dominion fleet. "Arya, what's our status?" he asked. "Critical, Captain. We have minimal remaining power, significant hull damage, and no functional weapon systems remaining. I would recommend immediate evacuation procedures if possible." Daniel looked around at his exhausted crew, all of them still standing, still fighting despite everything they had already been through. "Can we make it back to Earth?" he asked. "Unlikely with our current propulsion capability, Captain. We have enough power for minimal life support, but engine function is critically limited." Mira, exhausted but still working, looked up from her console. "Captain, I might be able to squeeze a little more power from our remaining reserves. It won't be much, but it might be enough to at least get us moving toward Earth's defense perimeter, where rescue might be possible." "Do what you can," Daniel said. As Mira worked, Daniel moved through the ship, checking on his crew one final time. Dr. Kim was tending to Ensign Webb, both of them watching the tactical display with cautious hope. Other crew members, exhausted beyond measure, still monitored their stations, refusing to give up despite everything. "We're not done yet," Daniel said to them, his voice filled with quiet determination despite his own exhaustion. "Just a little longer." Outside, the battle continued to shift dramatically. With the Dominion flagship crippled and unable to coordinate the massive invasion fleet, human forces, though still badly outnumbered, began finding success against the confused and disorganized enemy ships. Fleet Group 4, believed lost hours earlier, suddenly reappeared from behind a nearby moon, launching a surprise attack against a group of Dominion cruisers left without clear orders. Fleet Group 2, though reduced to only a handful of ships, coordinated a precise strike against enemy supply lines, further disrupting the invasion's momentum. Slowly, gradually, the tide of battle began to shift. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Threxus watched with growing fury and disbelief as reports continued flooding in of losses across his fleet. "Commander," Kor said urgently, "several fleet groups are requesting orders. Without central coordination, they're being picked apart individually by human counterattacks." Threxus's golden eyes narrowed sharply. "Get emergency communications online. I want direct control restored immediately." "Attempting, Commander, but our systems are still severely damaged from the initial attack." Threxus slammed his fist against his console in frustration, watching helplessly as his once unstoppable invasion continued crumbling before his eyes. Back aboard the Icarus, Mira finally looked up from her console. Exhaustion evident, but also a small, hopeful smile crossing her face. "Captain, I managed to reroute enough power for limited engine function. We won't be fast, but we should be able to move toward Earth's defense perimeter." "Do it," Daniel said, slow and steady. The Icarus, badly damaged but still functioning, began moving slowly away from the crippled flagship, heading cautiously toward Earth's remaining defense forces. As they moved, Daniel watched the continuing battle unfold on their tactical display. Human ships fighting with renewed determination against the disorganized Dominion fleet, slowly but steadily pushing back against forces that, only hours earlier, had seemed completely unstoppable. "Arya," Daniel said, "send a message to all remaining human forces. Let them know the Icarus is heading toward the defense perimeter, badly damaged, requesting escort if possible." "Message sent, Captain." Minutes passed slowly as the Icarus continued its careful, limited journey through the debris-filled battlefield. Then, Arya's voice broke the tense silence. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple human fighter craft approaching our position." Daniel looked up sharply at the tactical display, watching as a small squadron of human fighters, battered but still flying, approached the Icarus protectively. A voice crackled through their damaged communication system. "Icarus, this is Fleet Group 2. We heard what you did out there. Figured you could use an escort home." Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixing with exhaustion so deep it nearly brought him to his knees. "Fleet Group 2, this is Captain Reyes aboard the Icarus. We would very much appreciate that." The small squadron formed protectively around the badly damaged Icarus, escorting the crippled vessel carefully through the debris field, watching for any remaining threats as they made their slow journey toward Earth's defense perimeter. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Threxus finally managed to restore limited emergency communications, though the damage to his fleet's coordination had already been done. "Status report," he demanded. Kor's expression was grim. "Commander, we've lost approximately 30% of our engaged forces due to the disruption in coordination. Human counterattacks have been more effective than initially projected." Threxus stared at the tactical display, watching as his once overwhelming advantage had been significantly reduced by the chaos caused by a single small vessel's daring attack. "Order immediate regrouping," Threxus said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We will resume the assault once coordination is restored." But even as he gave the order, Threxus understood the deeper truth of what had just occurred. The invasion, which he had been so confident would end quickly and decisively, had just been fundamentally changed by an act of courage and sacrifice he had never anticipated from a species he had considered weak and predictable. Humanity was not defeated. Not yet. Back aboard the Icarus, now safely within Earth's defense perimeter, escorted by grateful human fighter pilots, Daniel finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. "Aria," he said quietly, "how are we looking?" "Critical but stable, Captain. Life support functioning at minimal levels. Structural integrity holding, though barely. I would recommend immediate docking with the nearest human station for repairs and medical attention." "Get us there," Daniel said. As the badly damaged Icarus, escorted by its protective squadron, finally approached a heavily damaged but still functional human space station, Daniel allowed himself to think, for the first time in hours, that perhaps they had truly made a difference. The station's docking bay opened to receive them, medical teams already waiting anxiously as the battered ship carefully maneuvered into position. As the Icarus finally settled into the docking clamps, its engines powering down for what felt like the first time in an eternity, Daniel turned to look at his exhausted, injured but undeniably alive crew. "We made it," he said quietly, disbelief evident in his tired voice. Mira, leaning heavily against her console, managed a weak but genuine smile. "Yeah, we really did." As medical teams rushed aboard to assist the injured crew, Daniel found himself being helped toward the exit by two waiting officers, his body finally allowing itself to acknowledge the exhaustion and pain it had been ignoring for hours. Outside, on the station's main viewport, Daniel caught a final glimpse of the ongoing battle beyond Earth's defense perimeter. Dominion forces, though still numerous, now clearly struggling against renewed human resistance, their once overwhelming advantage significantly diminished by the chaos caused by a single, small, determined ship. Days later, as Daniel slowly recovered in a station medical bay, General Vasquez visited him personally, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and profound gratitude. "The Dominion fleet has withdrawn to regroup," she told him. "Your attack on their flagship didn't win the war, Captain. But it changed everything. It proved they can be hurt, that they're not invincible. It gave humanity something we desperately needed." "What's that?" Daniel asked weakly. "Hope," Elena said simply. "Real hope, not just desperate defiance." Daniel closed his eyes, thinking about his crew, about Mira's steady hands during their darkest moments, about Marcus's brave journey through the airless corridor, about every small act of courage that had somehow, against all odds, allowed a single damaged ship to change the course of an entire war. "We're not finished yet, are we?" he asked quietly. Elena shook her head slowly. "No, Captain, this is just the beginning. But for the first time since this invasion started, I think we actually have a real chance." Far above Earth, aboard his damaged flagship, Commander Threxus stared out at the darkness of space, contemplating the unexpected turn his supposedly certain invasion had taken. He had studied humanity for years, believed he understood their weaknesses completely. But he had failed to understand one crucial truth about this stubborn, determined species. Even when broken, even when outnumbered, even when facing impossible odds, they refused to simply give up. "Prepare the fleet for a new offensive," Threxus finally ordered, his voice colder and more determined than before. "We underestimated them once. It will not happen again." But deep down, even Threxus understood that something fundamental had changed that day. Humanity, which he had once confidently declared defeated, had proven itself capable of striking back, of hurting even the most powerful forces in ways no one had anticipated. The war was far from over. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson that day, one that would echo throughout the remaining conflict to come. Never underestimate a species that refuses to accept defeat. Never underestimate humanity.